What does the NSA meeting between President Putin and Ajit Doval mean for India? NSA's meeting with President Putin suggests a new dynamic in India-Russia relations. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval earned a diplomatic bonus by visiting Moscow last week for a meeting of regional security advisors. Relations with top national security officials in the region are valuable tools, but breakthroughs were not expected. There are too many regional forums on Afghanistan, but none of Kabul's neighbors have the clout to change the country's geopolitical instability. Putin's decision to break the protocol and meet a top Indian official is arguably a more interesting outcome from Doval's Moscow visit. The Russian president rarely meets foreign cabinet ministers, let alone security officials. That Doval's audience with Putin came after the Indian National Security Advisor's recent visits to Washington and London, which are leading the Western coalition to support Ukraine in its efforts to vacate the Russian aggression that began a year ago this month, has also lent a special context to Doval's talks in Moscow. Although Delhi and Moscow have been tight-lipped about the details of Putin's message to Doval, the new dynamic surrounding India's engagement with Moscow is hard to miss. The war in Ukraine is set for a massive escalation in spring as both Moscow and Kyiv prepare to launch major military offensives. The massive costs of the war are also boosting voices demanding early diplomatic negotiations to end the war. Delhi, which has consistently called for cessation of violence and dialogue in Ukraine, is preparing to host the G20 and SCO summits this year, and will be expected to play a constructive role in facilitating the dialogue between Russia, Ukraine, and the West. Keeping channels open to Russia while sustaining the engagement with the West are critical preconditions for any effective Indian diplomacy on Ukraine. Beyond India's long-shot potential role for peacemaking in Ukraine, the confrontation between Russia and the West has severely constrained India's great power relations. Adding complexity to the challenge has been the sharpening territorial conflict between India and China since 2020 and the new alliance without limits that Beijing and Moscow unveiled last year. India strengthened ties with the US to deal with the Chinese threat, but avoided severing ties with Russia. Certainly Moscow isn't too happy about Delhi's embrace of Indo-Pacific construction and plazas. He is also not happy with new initiatives to deepen India-US defense and technology partnerships that promise to undermine relations between Delhi and Moscow in the long run. But Moscow has no reason to push Delhi out of the country's growing international isolation. Delhi's tightrope linking Russia with the West has been impressive so far. But as the war in Ukraine enters a new and bloody phase, it is likely to get much more difficult. Oleg Matveyev, an MP with Russia's largest political party, United Russia, which backs Putin, said in an interview that the biggest threat to Putin is now supporters of the Ukraine war who are unhappy with the progress of the conflict, The Times of London reported.